you all share your screens. I'll moderate presentations, keep timing and such in the chat. Tom's managing the waiting room, letting everybody in just pretty much instantly. We try to use that just to gate who comes in. Dave will be doing the chat and Q&A. And like yesterday, if you all missed it, he'll wait at the end and call on people. If you raise your hands or type in the chat, he'll call on you. You can unmute and turn on your video and do that. And Steve will be going around making sure people are muted and have their cameras off if not. If they're not the team, just to help with the bandwidth so the focus stays on the team. So with that, whenever you all are ready, team, for day 2 of finals, memoir.
Awesome. Just swapping out our share screen in a second. Yeah, I'll be sharing my screen. I'm just getting the window host disabled participant screen sharing.
Try now.
Yep, there we go. Oh, sorry, it's just on the end of the presentation instead of the start. Cool. That appear all right for everyone?
Yep.
Cool. Whenever you're ready to go, Sally, take it away.
All right. Hello, everyone. We are Memoir. So this is our team. And our client is Jessica Hammer of the O Lab, and she's working alongside Erica Principe Cruz and Snap Inc. on this project. And our faculty advisors are Heather Kelly and Tom Corbett. So I'm Sally, and I'm co-producer and artist on this project, and I'll be introducing what we created. So Memoir created an augmented reality experience to explore the future of storytelling. We created this experience for the ACM Interactive Media Experiences Conference in Barcelona, and we'll be presenting this project virtually at the conference this June. For our project, we decided to adapt the board game Rosenstrasse that was created by our client, Jessica Hammer. And Rosenstrasse is a historical role-playing game that explores marriages between Jews and Aryan Germans from 1930 to 1943. The game culminates in the women-led protest of Rosenstrasse, and players role-play as both a Jewish man and a German Aryan woman to experience persecution and resistance from multiple perspectives. So in our game, players have to move in real-world space guided by markers and prompts, and both players can also see the same objects via networking between iPads. This semester, we adapted Rosenstrasse into a playable AR demo, and we created documentation for our client to turn the demo into a full experience. That being said, I would like to introduce a brief clip from our game, We Choose Each Other AR Rosenstrasse Experience. In this scene, you'll see 2 players role-playing after encountering Kristallnacht, the Night of Broken Glass, where Jewish businesses were targeted in Berlin during World War II. In this video, you will be hearing their voices as they role-play, while we see AR through an iPad screen.
Huh. Oh my God. Do you hear that too? What is going on? Oh my God.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. Look at that window though.
I guess we have to clean this up.
Okay, let's get started.
I mean, up until now, this wasn't... It wasn't in our own home.
Guess it was a matter of time. Oh, the rose. Okay, let's pick up the rose.
Okay.
Okay, let's press it into an album. There's gonna be more to this memory than pain.
I mean, what do you want me to write? Maybe over time it'll be something else, but right now this is a ruined rose. I couldn't do this if you weren't here.
Do you remember the song that you played back when we first met at the park?
Yeah.
Can you play that for me again?
Definitely. Give me a sec.
So now I'll hand it off to Chelsea, who'll talk a bit more about narrative.
Thank you, Sally. Hi, I'm Chelsea. I'm a 3D artist in this team. I'll talk about the conceptual design and the story we made. So from all the relationships in Rosenstrasse, we picked the romantic romantic relationship between Jewish violinist Max and Aryan florist Annalise. Then we designed a location-based two-player role-playing AR game using iPad. We divided the story into 7 chapters. For the scope of this semester, we narrowed down to the 3 most important chapters to build a 15 to 20-minute AR experience. And to maintain the continuity, we made transitions between chapters to show what happened in between the picked ones. And to express the strong emotions of the original Rosenstrasse, we set our design pillars to be we choose each other and our world is getting smaller. Thus, the experience we made focuses on interpersonal relationships between characters, as well as their suffering in that historical period. To adapt the story from Rosenstrasse, we focused on design pillar we choose each other in the first chapter. Max and Annalise first encounter each other in the park when Anna drops her flowers in Max's violin case. Then they have a chance to interact with each other by picking up flowers together. Max gets to choose Anna by playing violin for her. We also included individual actions for each player to know more about their characters. Anna sorts flowers in the flower shop because she works there. Max composes music at home because he's a violinist. There's a transition following chapter 1 to show the 2 characters later got married. They had other happy memories in the park where they first met, and Anna moved into Max's apartment. The second chapter focuses on the design pillar, our world is getting smaller. Their married life during World War II is not easy. They cannot leave their apartment during the night of Kristallnacht, but they can still interact by making tea, cleaning the broken glass on the table, and pressing the flower into an album together as shown in the video. And Max plays his violin for Anna at the end. The transition between chapter 2 and 3 shows the brown shirts broke Max's violin and the flower shop was forced to close because its owner is Jewish. Then we bring the 2 design pillars together in chapter 3. The 2 characters are physically separated when Max is taken to Rosenstrasse. Max gets to choose Anna one last time by writing to her how he feels about her. Anna gets to choose Max by joining the protesters chanting. Then the story ends with Max's release from Rosenstrasse. I'll pass it to Mintz to talk about specific mechanics and how we made this story into an interactive AR experience.
Thank you, Chelsea. Hi, I'm Mintz. I'm the experience designer in this team. Now I'm going to talk about what is our emotional design. To adapt this romantic story, we use emotional design as the top strategy. It can be divided into 2 main parts. One is visual and sound design, and the other is physical interaction. Inspired by Rosenstrasse itself, which means Rose Street in German, AR markers take the form of street signs representing different locations in Berlin. They fit in both the physical and digital worlds. As for the interfaces, we use a shape matching mechanism to let the player know how to find the locations and scan the markers. Prompts appear after certain events are triggered. These prompts guide the players to roleplay. We use a paper-like UI and a page-turning sound effect to cast the iPad as a memoir of Max and Anna's story to increase the immersion. Based on the feedback from playtesters, faculty, and our client, we've iterated for several times to minimize the size of UI to let the player focus on the AR scene and separated the narration and the instruction clearly. As for the crowd of people back in that history, we decided not to use realistic concrete human figures, which may probably break the immersion. Instead, we use silhouettes with narrative sounds to let the player augment the fear or tension by their own imagination. Based on the feedback in playtest, we also moved the silhouettes from the screen to 3D space to strengthen the spatial interaction. To fill the time gap in transition, we use particle effects and sound to show season changing. From a happy marriage in a bright summer to a chilly winter indicating an incoming tragical event. All of these are shown as photos in the scrapbook after the player walk around and scan the markers. Another case of how nature affects humans' emotion is weather. In the second transition, we use light rain and heavy rain with lightning to show how things get even worse after the crystal knot. We also iterated the transition and added the flipping scrapbook to make this part fit in the whole environment. One of our main design purpose is to let the players ignore the existence of the digital devices. Instead, they will naturally view their tablet as their eyes to see the world, their hand to grab things, the object in their hand to interact with, as well as a facilitator to push forward the story. So we use physical movement as one of the consistent interactive languages in this experience. We first introduced this mechanism to players by having them sort flowers and compose music. After Max and Anna finish collecting all the flowers, Max passes them to Anna. To achieve this effect, we use a basket full of flowers as a marker on the screen of the iPad. It works naturally as a container so the player knows where to put the flowers. We also use multisensory to create strong emotional interactions where players can better understand that historical situation and freely respond with their own input. There are a lot of echoes in narrative to keep the user engagement. For example, Max plays the violin after they first met and the crystal knocked. We use same interaction in different emotional situations to strengthen the memories of the players and arouse their thoughts on history after homes are ruined. The empty tea box is a symbol indicating something bad to happen. We use these repetitive events to hint the narrative and set the overall atmosphere. Based on the playtest feedback, we also iterated the story and introduced the writing mechanism early in chapter 2 to get the player ready for chapter 3. Now let Ryan to talk about the technology.
Thank you, Ming. I'm Ryan, the programmer of this team, and I'm going to talk about the technology. First, I'm going to introduce the structure of our application. The application contains two parts, the server and the client. Both were developed with Unity. The purpose of setting up a server on PC is to sync to tablets when the game goes and make debugging easier, since we can monitor the states of two tablets and make runtime fixes without rebuilding the application. Vuforia is integrated into a client to realize AR features. So what is Vuforia? Vuforia is a toolkit similar to ARKit and ARCore, which enables marker detection, but it is easier to start with and has better compatibility with Unity. Next, I will focus on some technical difficulties we met and how we solved them. First, if we want to build a multiplayer game on tablets, we need to build project twice and transfer data twice, which takes a lot of time. In order to save time in this process, we use several techniques, including using webcam to preview AR features on PC, writing wrapper code to fake user input, and batching the testing tasks. Also, there are some issues caused by combining different platforms. For example, Vuforia would block the image stream from the front camera, which we needed in order to make the tablets act like mirrors. Besides that, Vuforia could not run on latest iOS system. Some speech recognition plugins were also not supported. So we made several adjustments based on these issues. Take speech recognition as an example. At first, we used MRTK, a plugin developed by Microsoft, but it was not supported for iOS. So we used another plugin, KK Speech. However, this plugin could only run on an actual tablet, which made testing in Unity difficult. So we wrote some wrappers to fake data generated from the plugin and stop the speech recognition manually. At last, there are also issues generated from AR itself. One problem was that there were no fixed coordinates related to a player and the world. So some components based on global space, like trail renderer and timeline, could not be used. For example, we developed the handwriting mechanism with trail renderer at the very beginning, as we could see here. But when we applied to the AR scene, it was messed up. So we had to rebuild this functionality in a different way. We ultimately used a particle system to implement the handwriting mechanism. Similarly, since the world space transforms were not reliable, but we need the silhouettes to look like human beings in world space, we decided to calculate the world space transforms using their local transforms. And next, I will hand to Derek to talk about our production.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ryan. Just double checking that I'm audible. Great. Hi, I'm Derek. I am a co-producer as well as game designer on this project, and I'll be wrapping up with how do we enable future development. So these were our metrics and goals at halves: client requirements, innovation, and storytelling and writing. We, like many of the other teams at the ETC, had to transfer to work from home, and here's how these metrics changed. as you can see in talking with our client, Jess Hammer, we came to focus on documentation for this project over kind of our previous goal of building physical materials for this experience and taking it to Barcelona. Jess has expressed great interest in actually pursuing and finishing development on this game in its current state, right? A physical location-based experience with a more theatrical narrative set. And thus, here are some things we learned through this project that we could have only learned by building what we built. Documentation, it's a tale as old as time, but one that haunts us to this day and one we think about and have grown from. Trying to capture kind of that multi-interface storytelling in particular and trying to accurately construct that. Additionally, one of the greatest challenges we faced this semester was remote playtesting and the subsequent lack of narrative polish that came up at Softs. Kind of our best answer to getting feedback on our project took the form of these edited gameplay videos, as you can see on the bottom right. These eventually took the form of kind of combined high fidelity, spliced together composite videos using footage of me and my roommate moving in physical space, our voiceovers to kind of communicate what players would be talking about, as well as on-screen iPad recordings from Ryan's home. So kind of the last steps of this project are handing this off to Jess, presenting this in June remotely at the Snap Creative Challenge, as well as collaborating with Erica for her research interests. So in summary, we are Memoir, and we created an augmented reality experience to explore the future of storytelling. Our answer to the future of storytelling was Rosenstrasse, We Choose Each Other, a multiplayer, location-based, role-playing augmented reality game. And we are now open for questions. Thank you.
So this is Ralph speaking. So you weren't able to do any, obviously no play testing at all, right? Because by the time the shutdown hit, you guys hadn't been in any position to do any play testing, were you?
Yeah, so the question was kind of like the extent of our playtesting post like work from home. I can, is that correct?
Yep, that's correct.
Yeah, I can answer that. So kind of our best stab at getting like in situ, we were able to maintain and get feedback, but nothing quite like live, putting people within 6 feet of each other in the theatrical space and playing the game. That was not possible.
Were you able to, you're play testing your demographics? Was it ETC students or was it people of, other people, other adults?
Yeah, kind of the demographics as we understood them, actually. This is a slide from Halves. As we understood our demographics followed pretty similarly to the original Rosenstrasse board game, which was people with a role-playing background, strong, confident role-playing background, as well as a strong interest in the historical period, right? A strong history focus. That was one of the things we came to grapple with was even if our methods to get feedback and playtest data are also hampered, our ability to find our ideal target audience is similarly hampered. And so we collaborated even more closely with Jess, kind of our impromptu subject matter expert, to get as much resolution into this specific target audience and specific feedback on a specific experience as well.
Thank you.
Mike's next, and then after Mike will be Mo.
Yeah, I have a question about using the AR as a facilitator and prompting. If you don't prompt at all, your guests might do unusual things and stray the course. If you prompt too much, they might become disengaged and lose all agency and just follow your script. How did you iterate on the level of prompting?
Yeah, so to repeat the question, if one of our goals was to use the iPad as a facilitator being extremely important for most role-playing games, how did we kind of walk the line between giving enough support to scaffold their understanding, but without micromanaging their every action? It came down to, right, we mentioned that page turning sound effect. Previously, that was like a typing sound effect. So that became kind of like one of the one like design language we could use to say, hi, this is what we'd like you to do next. But based on like the spatial, kind of like the unorthodox nature of the mechanics themselves, before we went remote, we found people looking for more scaffolding as opposed to less. We were unfortunately unable to see how that understanding would evolve over the course of a full 15-minute experience. But in the first 5 minutes, like in chapter 1, people really wanted more character details, more immersion, more specificity. And so we erred on that sense.
Time for one more?
Yeah, I have a quick question. In the documentation, I thought the documentation looked quite nice, but I was a little confused. The audio we were hearing, was that role playing, and do you have kind of a mechanism so we can understand in the documentation which part is role playing, which is canned audio? When are they interacting?
Sure. So to repeat your question, the video we showed had people role playing. Me and my roommate were voicing over kind of what two people would say. In our documentation, how do we keep that distinct? What is something we've made versus what is something we have done to try to get the accurate feel of the game? Yeah, Mins did a lot of work with our audio, actually. Would you like to take a stab, Mins, or would you? It's also documentation, so I could also take a stab.
As for the documentation, we made a flow chart for the whole experience. It includes all the art assets and audio assets we used in every interaction point. And we also made a script doc to keep all these audio lines in this experience. Also, we recorded the whole experience, the video of the whole experience, to hand it to the future team for reference.
All right, thanks team, good job. Yay. So Memoir, you're all finished, good job. If you don't mind muting yourself, turning off your video, and we'll have Rain Vibes step up. It's Rain Vibe in the room. In the Zoom room. Oh, there they are. Check them out. All right. Whenever you all are ready.
Okay.
So let me share my screen.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, I just sent a link to the chat channel, but this will be used at the end of our presentation.
All right. Can I start?
Yep.
Oh, not ready. Okay. You want to use the presenter view?
Yeah, there we go.
Okay. Can I start?
You can start.
Okay. Hello, everyone. We're Team Rain Vibe. We produced a traditional short animation film from an assigned pre-production package and making a pre-design package for a future team. This is the team. Our faculty advisors are Bruce and John. The goal of this project is to get students to experience working in the animation production pipeline. To us, it's on art skills and building cohesive worlds. This film tells the story of the Native American spirit that's calling the rain and celebrating its power of reviving. To experience a complete pipeline, we also did a pre-production package for a future team. And then Rosie will talk about our pre-production package.
Thanks, Wei Di. As she already said, we also prepared a pre-production package for a future team. This pre-package will be documented until the faculty finds a future group with all proper team roles to produce it. That being said, I would love to introduce our pre-package. High mountains and flowing water is a phrase to describe the true friendship, to understand and to be understood. The ultimate friendship to be depicted in Chinese literature is probably the one between Yu Boya and Zhong Ziqi, who lived in the spring and autumn period. This music piece has a long history, and the version we're hearing right now is in the public domain, performed by Guan Honghu. The art style during that period is very unique. We found a lot of references. As we can see, people at that time period used lines and shapes to mimic the mountains and rivers. They drew on fabrics, papers, and sometimes using very saturated colors. We want to add this kind of art elements into our piece as well. Next, I will show the character concept art. Boya is famous for playing 7-strings qin. He spent his whole life playing qin. Ziqi was a woodman who used birds to indicate he gains his music gift from Mother Nature. For the story, this is part of our storyboard. In some shots, we choose an experimental round-shaped frame. Since circle is a common element in Chinese culture, which means inclusive, we use it to emphasize the character's characteristic. Yu was a master of music who played the guqin, and Zhong is the only one who can understand his music. Zhong can see the magnificent mountain and rushing river when Yu was playing music. After Zhong's death, Yu played the high mountains and flowing water one last time for Zhong and broke his guqin, for he no longer has a friend who understands his music. For this pre-package, our suggested team roles are TAs for VFX and rendering, artists, and animators. We suggest these roles, but it can adapt as most other teams need to. The team could be 2D or 3D team, since we could render 3D animations to 2D. Since in ETC, we have a lot of talented technical artists. Here, we let them do all the ink and smoke effects, giving them a chance to shine. Next, I would like Kara to introduce our production process.
Thanks, Rosie. As Weishen mentioned before, this film tells the story of a Native American spirit that is calling the rain and celebrating its power of reviving. Our story is built upon the idea that in Native American culture, everything goes through a cycle. For example, the season switching, the death, and new birth. To better present our core concept, we research on related topics. We watched several films and animations, went to Carnegie Museum of Natural History, and read some books for cultural research. Based on our cultural research, we chose Arizona as our reference and learned its landscape, vegetation, flowers, and desert bloom. Moreover, our animation does not have only one kind of environment. It's a combination of 3 different environments: the arid desert, the raining desert, and the revived desert. We also made 2 different ground materials to enhance the difference. Cultural affairs has been a huge worry of this project. We reached out many Navajo experts. Ben Soro, the associate registrar at the Navajo Nation Museum, is one of them. He's really helpful and gave us many good advices. We made an online meeting with him and keep communicating through emails weekly. Then let's talk about the character design. Our character has been iterated several times. At the very beginning, we made our main character a girl by instinct. Luckily, after we built a strong connection with our Navajo culture expert, Ben, he told us they have female rain and male rain in Navajo culture, and female rain goes exactly same as our story. It's gentle, caring, and grows seeds into plants. Also, according to his advices, we did a lot of research. We iterate our character design over and over just to make things right. As you can see, we tagged different labels on our characters so that we could make sure that even the smallest thing stays true to the culture. Then we made our first version of the 3D model. Then to make her life well, we gave her a pair of shoes in our final version. Next, JD will talk about the pipeline.
Thanks, Kara. Now I will introduce our animation production pipeline. We started by making a storyboard according to a given pre-production package. Then we iterate through 2D animatics to 3D animatics to lock down our cameras. Then digital assets are created, assembled and rendered. Finally, we applied post-processing on the rendered sequences. During the process, there were a number of technical points to be mentioned. I'm going to give you an overview of what is included in this piece. First, we are creating and animating assets in Blender and Maya. Then we have the fluid simulation in Houdini, hair and cloth simulated in Unreal. We applied ray tracing in rendering. Besides, a lot of visual effects are included and implemented within Unreal. Finally, we did the shot transitions and color correction in Premiere for post-processing. Animation plays a huge part in our piece, but we lost our animator in the beginning of the semester. Thus, our artists began applying keyframe animations for the environment asset in Maya and human character in Blender, according to their preference. We were planning to use motion capture for our character, but we were not able to access the mocap lab after we moved to work remotely. Instead, we keyframed her animation referring to the samples provided by our action designer, Amara. Her video provided us with good reference for gestures and pacing. For the blinking of the character, we're using morph targets. Unreal has provided us good control with its animation curves for morph targets. However, you can see that hair and cloth is not included at this stage. Next, let me introduce Zoltan to talk about more of our technical details.
Thanks, JD. And I'm gonna walk you through some technical challenges that we've overcome. The rain plays an important role in our film. We have different rain in different shots, and of course with different methods to simulate. The first one is to simulate the first raindrop in a close-up shot, which needs to be very delicate. We decided to simulate the rain interaction between droplet and tree branch in Houdini. Then the simulation result is exported from Houdini into Unreal. After we have the droplet in Unreal, we realized that the default water material in Unreal is too weak for this shot, because in this close-up shot, we need the droplet to be noticed by every audience. To solve this problem, we added some rim light effect on the material and found a balance between reality and attractiveness. And this is the final result. Here is a slow version just to make it clear for you. We also need to make the environment getting wet during the rain. We decided to use a technique called decal material. Basically, what it does is to project one material on top of the others. With this technique, we can easily make the whole environment getting wet without changing all the materials one by one. For the hair simulation, we divided her hair into two parts. One is the upper part of her hair, which is shaking in this GIF, and the other part is her braids. The first part is simulated with Unreal Hair Groom feature and Niagara system. And the braids are simulated with Bone Chain, which is a part of Unreal built-in physics engine. Then we have a magic winged Niagara system. Essentially, it is a particle system that can follow an editable curve. With this tool, we can easily adjust the curve to form any path we want. For the rendering, we are using Unreal ray tracing feature, which can push our light and shadow quality to a higher level. This image is rendered while the ray tracing feature is off. And this one is rendered with the ray tracing feature on. Look how different they are. And if we put them together, the differences becomes more obvious. The shadow becomes more soft, and the whole environment becomes brighter and more vivid, especially the downside of those flowers. We're also doing some post-editing work in Premiere. For example, we cut things and we make transitions. And the most important, we do color correction in Premiere, which is quite helpful to enhance our emotional curve. Next, I will hand off to Weidi, and she will do a summary.
Thanks, Zoltan. After the whole process of doing this project, we learned a lot of lessons. First of all, to plan early, and then set up a scale before start. Only do what is visible in the camera. And the most important thing is, don't be afraid to reach out to the experts. A lot of thanks to a lot of people who have been helping us a lot and then make us better. And then right now is the time for the video. can everyone click into the link that Kara just sent out in the chat, and then make sure that you mute yourself. We'll be back in 3 minutes.
Yeah, John is saying that the copy is not enabled. So let me try to share the video in my screen. And I don't know whether it is fluent enough to watch, but let's have a try.
Hello, everyone. We're Team Dream Vibe. We produce a
Yeah, actually, you can just click the link and then open a browser, yes. The link that from Kara says our animation link should be the right link. Okay.
Can you make it full screen?
Yeah, I think it is full screen.
Thank you very much.
All right, great job, team. Yay.
Thanks.
And Dave's going to help moderate Q&A.
So I have a question. so your pivot from mocap, how did you say you did it again? How did you move from planning a mocap performance to what you've used now?
Hand key animation.
So were you happy with it, or would you have preferred to use mocap?
Okay, the question is, are we happy with the hand key animations, or we prefer using mocap? Rosie, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I guess. Well, it has some advantage, yeah, because mocap you could capture all the all the motions from the performer. But actually, if you go into like the Disney movies, although they have that technique, they still choose hand key, because hand key, you can exaggerate the motions. You can add a lot of things that the performer cannot provide you. So I rather than mocap, we use the reference video that provided by our dancer Amara, and I think that pulled off. I like the end result, and I am able to learn a lot from this. So I am happy with that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Ricardo, then Carl.
So you guys use Unreal Studio. Well, you guys use Unreal as a production studio. Do you have any advice? Like, what's your main piece of advice for future teams who might want to do the same thing?
Okay, the question is, do we have any advice for the future team who would like to use Unreal Engine to render a animation? So do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I can speak to that. I think Unreal have a lot of nice features for us to use. For example, the physics simulation, which we have used for our hair and our braid and our cloth simulation. But still, we also, to be honest, we also suffered a lot when using Unreal as a assembler to assemble all the parts that's coming from different platform and different softwares. And I think that's a problem, because I think the major concern is the scale. After the major suggestion would be just to make sure the scale is uniformed, and that's it. And also one interesting feature we have tried is the ray tracing feature of Unreal. I think that's cool, but it is a beta feature, which means it is not stable enough and might not work correct with a lot of other features in Unreal. So just think twice before you want to use that. Yeah, that's it.
Time for one more?
Mm-hmm. Please.
Carl?
No, that's all right. It was answered already. Thank you.
Oh, thanks.
All right, great job, team. Good job, Rainbow. Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So if you all can mute yourself and turn your videos off, and now we'll bring up IF, Team If. Are they in the house? Yep, there they are. We're good to go whenever you're all ready.
Okay, now I'm gonna start. Hi, we're Team If, and today we're gonna do our final presentation. First, let's introduce our team to you. I'm Aubrey, I'm the project producer and UX designer.
Hi, I'm Xingxiu, I'm the UI UX designer.
I'm Leo, I'm the software and hardware developer.
I'm Amelia, I'm the interactive designer and technologist.
And I'm Eitan, I'm software hardware developer.
Our faculty instructors are Shirley and Ruth. Our clients are from the Children's Museum of Pittsburgh and the Museum Lab. We're collaborating with Children's Museum of Pittsburgh and Museum Lab to create a part of an interactive fashion exhibitions for children of age 10 to 14. We intend to provide visitors the opportunity to play with wearable technology that triggers the communication between LEDs when they interact within the environment.
In order to increase the throughput, we designed 3 sets of dress forms in total. We'll be handing off 1 completed set and the documentation for the final installation, table design, and the dress form duplication at the end of the post-production stage. Our project metrics are documentation and archive, playtesting, and client's requirements. In this presentation, we're going to cover 4 sections in total. Now Amelia is going to talk about what we have accomplished.
Thank you, Aubrey. Now let's look at what we have accomplished. So first, let's look at our demo video.
So for this experience, the LED will react to your approach. And when you come to the table, you can use the external tablets to customize your own patterns. And also you can choose from different layouts. Another thing to play with is the color detection. So you can decide on the color and also the effects on the sleeves to make it match or coordinate with the pattern inside.
So as the video shows, we now have 3 features. First is the welcome zoom. So LEDs on the clothes will visualize guest distance. And second is create a pattern. So guests may use the external tablets editor to customize their own patterns. And also the real world color picker. So guests may grab whatever they want to be detected by the color sensor, change the color and effects of the LEDs on the sleeves by using it. Now let's look at our design changes. So originally we have 3 sets of mannequins located side by side, but considering of the budgets, client requirements, and ways of interaction, we settled on the ideas of having a round table design to display the interactive installation. We think this layout helps to promote communication between the guests and it can increase throughput. We keep adding more details all the way. So now we designed a set of exposition supporter in front of each dress form on the table for the guests to create pattern and change the color. And we placed the distance sensor under the table for welcome zoom. We opened the space for cooling. And there is a door under the table for keeping the power supply and power strips protected so no one can reach in. We also did lots of research on the table design. Considering children and wheelchair people, the dress forms are placed in a suitable height in their viewpoints, and the table's height is suitable for them to play interaction on the table. We worked with our client to choose 3 sets of clothes that all shows differences between them, but also they're all gender neutral. The reason we chose light color is for better e-textile visual effects. Now let's move on to Leo to talk about the second part.
Thank you, Amelia. So after seeing what we have accomplished, let's see how did we accomplish. This part will include researching related work, solving problems from have and solved, and breaking down parts and process. So during the whole process, we keep doing researches among related works. For example, the game Black Holes inspired us on the editor UI. The project Tactile is related to us because the color theory is one of our elements, and the project 143 contributes to our table design. And we took all the feedbacks from solved and from have and solved, and then we tried to answer and solve all of them to make the improvement. For example, there's a question from have that is, why not using fabric instead of vividly colored plastic ball as the interaction devices? That's a great question. So after that, we changed to use the fabric as the interaction device because we want our guests to play with our interaction with their own color item. Intuitively, that might be the cloth, but they might wear a white, gray, or black cloth. So we provide a colorful fabric for them to play with their interactions and see the combinations. And there's a question from Solve that is, what if the children write bad words on it? We discussed this with our clients, and our clients don't really worry about that since they had a writing exhibition before, and that is not a common issue. Also, they have staff to take care of the exhibition. And from our side, we have low resolution on the editor so that they cannot write that many alphabets. And also, we have a clear button that you can clear the image at once. And there's another question that is, why not putting on the hat and shoes? Our product is just part of the fashion exhibition. And our clients want the guests to come to our product, play with it, grab the experience, grab the experience to other part of the exhibition that is about hats and shoes. And there are many, many questions. We answer all of them and try and take those feedback opinion to improve our projects. Let's look at the parts breakdown. Although it looks like one experience, but actually we can divide them into 3 interactions. That is welcome zone, career pattern, and real world color picker. They have their own function, hardware, and the device they're connected to. By dividing them into 3, so our programmers can develop them parallelly. For welcome zone, after half, we do the prototyping and then we increase distance accuracy. For career pattern, we do the prototyping and we build a stable connection and define the mapping protocol between Unity and Arduino. And for the real world color picker, we do the prototyping, we increase the color accuracy, and also we create the animations. And let's look at the process breakdown. So after the development of the editor and sensors, we have to merge them together. And after merging the code, we have to test and debug remotely so that we can come up with a version to play test and do the reiteration. So next, Xingxiu will talk about the process change.
Thank you, Leo. Now I will go over how we adjust to remote working after half. Remote working is a unique and uneasy way for our group to develop location-based installation. So we use real-time screen sharing while TeamViewer and Zoom to collab together to coding, debugging, and fabricating. To keep our teammates up to date, we use Google Sheets to update daily tasks. This will help us to identify if teammates is facing any difficulties so we can communicate and solve the problem as soon as possible. In the remote setting, we keep our faculty and clients even more up to date in the shared Google document format and held regular weekly meetings. Transiting to remote playtest, we stream the playtest and share demo video on social media. We conduct playtest with 77 people after the half. We actually have way more people joined us this way since we don't need to concern about locations and time zone differences. And now I will go over how we playtest with each group. Middle schooler is our target demographic. We stream playtests with several groups of students. Based on our observations, the installation is appealing to both genders. Students who are more outgoing are willing to participate in career pattern interactions, whereas the shyness students are more interested in welcome zone and real world color pickers. Also, some students want to see more changing effects on the sleeves in real world color picker interactions, so we improve it to 5 animations. The GIF shows 2 of the 5 animations on the sleeves. When people change color, it will show the next animation. We also play tests with our alumni, fellow classmates, and students from other colleges. Since these groups are people in the design field, so we focus more on playtest career pattern interactions that were finished after the half. People love these interactions that give them the freedom to create the pattern they like, but they also wish to see the pattern to be displayed larger on the clothes. Based on the feedback, we improve the functions that people can choose to display one single large pattern or smaller repetitive patterns, and we iterate the UIs with the new functions to be more user-friendly. We also stream the playtest and share online video with survey to playtest with our faculties. We focus on playtest the overall experience. People love that they can complete the design by career pattern and use any fabric nearby to change color. However, some people didn't notice the changing patterns in the welcome zone interactions since it's moving too fast. So we refine it into a heart shape, and it will be filled out when people walk toward the installation. And next, Itong will talk about our documentation and project summary.
Thank you, Xinxiu. So I'm going to talk about documentation and summary. First, about documentation. Documentation is one of our project metrics. And since we are going to deliver 3 sets of products, but will only be 1, and our client have to assemble the remaining 2, documentation become more critical in this scenario. Physical structure will help our client to install everything to the desk, and will list every component which we use in this project. And if any components are broken, our client could buy one and replace it easily. We also include some simple troubleshooting in it. The problem we had before or might happen in the future, we provide some information which can help our clients to solve the problem by themselves. And document also includes connection and facilitation instruction. And here are some tips for the installation. Since the environment in the museum is different from our place or ETC, we're concerned about several things which will improve the experience of our project, which is lighting, fabricating, and heat dissipation. To fabricate everything robust will greatly reduce the possibility of errors, and overheat might cause the device to have some trouble or even shut down. And the most important thing, what we learned in this project, first, to be brave. At the beginning of the semester, we are afraid of trying new things and play very safe. But our faculty told us to dream big, go crazy, and get our hands dirty. So we started to try some crazy idea like to throwing the ocean boat to the restroom, bringing several projectors to the museum and projecting around the museum. However, we took our client's requirement very seriously. Be brave and be serious isn't conflict. Every crazy idea is based on our client's requirement. We learn how to balance ourselves when requirements are conflict with each other and think creatively to figure out a way to solve the problem. And the last, to be proud. We learn to embrace every progress we made and be confident about the product we made. And most important, feeling proud as a team member in our team. Working with brilliant people are the most memorable and valuable lesson. And we have a feedback video from our client.
I really appreciated how you used your time with us. So when we had meetings, I feel like you took advantage of asking questions up front and getting the points of what you've been doing. And like each member of the team contributed what they brought to the table. And as far as this distance learning method that you're currently working on, I really appreciated how at the beginning you were really interested in getting to understand how the museum works, our mission, and what it is that we really believe in. And you tried to keep that, I think, at the forefront of what you were thinking as you were designing. Also interesting to me how I felt that you did listen to the client. As a client to you, you listened to what we wanted and said, and then you did it. So I think that you did a good job of taking into consideration not only our wants, but also the realities of our environment. So I'm very impressed by the fact that you managed to build physical, interactive objects from 5 different locations. I think your problem solving skills were definitely put to the test, and you did a great job.
We would like to say thank you to everyone who helped us during this process. And now we're open to questions.
Great job, team. Yay. Really appreciate you all doing that. And Dave will help moderate questions.
I think Mike has a question.
Yeah, I have a question on your pattern. When it's repeated, it looks like it's a little bit different in the repeat. Could you tell me why you did that? Because I'm a little curious. I thought it would be exactly the same, but maybe you had intent for making it a little bit different.
So the question is, Mike wants us to talk about how we design the repetitive pattern and what is how it's different from the previous ones. Is that right? Yeah. Want to take this question? Amelia, do you want to take this question?
Yeah, sure. So originally, through playtest, we find that the age of people, they are be fond of the repetitive patterns. And then we did more research and did more playtests with the children and also all ages people, and find that they actually don't have a particular preference between whether it's 3 repetitive patterns or 2 or like 4. So we want them to have the ability to have the freedom to choose. So right now they can choose from whether it's a bigger size of pattern you just drawed, or it's 2 of them scale them together, or 3 or 4 repetitive on the chest.
And when they repeat, they're not exact, right?
When they repeat, they're the same patterns as
exactly, because it just looked different in the video. They looked a little bit different in the different pieces.
They're exactly the same. Yeah.
I've got a question. So I appreciated the different types of playtesting you did being remote. I'm kind of curious, what playtest, if we didn't have to be remote, what playtest would you have liked to have run, and what would you have liked to have learned from that?
So the question is, what kind of playtest will be most helpful, or like the playtest that we think is most useful if we're not in remote working? Xinxiu, do you want to take this question?
Yes. So if we are not remote, we also want to play test the UI more. So before the half, since we are in the physical locations, and we can play test how people interact and if they understand the UI we have for the real world color pickers. But we for the welcome zone interactions, we improve the UI after the half. But that one need to be like footprint stickers on the floor. So after when it changes to remote play test, we cannot really play test since we don't have the physical space for people to see and play test that.
Time for one more.
I have a question. What if anything did you do to try to specifically to facilitate communication among the kids or the guests?
So the question is, what we tried about like facilitating this expression among kids and other kind of guests. Is that right? Do you want to take this question, Xinxiu? I can take it. What we tried about facilitating, that's why we have that section in our documentation, was because we also need to have our the staff at museum knows about how to reset and how to clear the canvas. Like the question that we got from Soft, people may have there's potential that people writing bad words or drawing like inappropriate images on the canvas. So that's why we need to maintain alert about what people are drawing, or like people how they treat the dress forms, and then how they interact with that table. So like we are going to hand off documentation about how to facilitate this exhibition and how to like clear the canvas at once to our museum staff, so they can help to maintain the order of this exhibition. And also the reason we designed the table like that was because people, like when we do the research at the very beginning, we noticed that around 10 to 14 ages kids, they are kind of like to destroy things, or like they may reach out to the dress form and then like grab things from the dress form. So that's why we designed the table like that. And then that will be also one of the tips to the staff at the museum, so they can keep an eye on like people, so they don't grab anything from the dress form or like destroy anything, since it's a like physical installation. Yeah.
All right, thanks team. Good job. Congratulations. Yay. So if you all don't mind muting yourself and turning off your video, and we'll have Giant Combat step up. Whenever y'all are ready.
All right, let's go for it.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone is doing good. We are Giant Combat and welcome to our final presentation. This is our very talented and dedicated team and our wonderful faculty instructors, Mike and Ricardo. So Giant Combat is a student pitch project that attempts to answer the question, how can melee combat in virtual reality against a large-scale enemy, or LSE, feel comfortable, satisfying, and cool? So our goals, we wanted to explore melee combat against a large-scale enemy in virtual reality throughout the course of this semester, and we wanted to develop high-fidelity prototypes using Valve Index hardware and the Unreal Engine. So talking about our progress at Halves, our first prototype was centered on climbing, as in rock climbing, and swinging around using grappling hooks. There was a lot of emphasis on loom response and making sure that the player felt the daunting size of the enemy. We also wanted to establish a solid framework for traversal and basic combat mechanics. Next. So the feedback that we received was that combat was not emphasized enough, and it was not a core feature in our initial hookshot prototype. Also, the interaction with the large-scale enemy was very limited. The other feedback that we got was that we were not taking enough risks and we were being too conservative in our exploration. And to fix this, we needed to start thinking outside the box. And now Simon is going to talk about how we proceeded with the rest of the semester.
Thanks, Ron. So right after half, we immediately built a prototype include a translucent LSE to verify the theory that we put out during the half, which is our players seldom get motion sickness because they're not seeing the horizon. After creating this experience, we found out that motion sickness still remains a non-issue. For limited amount of testing does not appear to be the case. Our submission for this is being task-oriented and focused is a psychological aid in preventing motion sickness. Also, by visibly being able to see one section on top of or underneath another is relatively confusing and strange to create a map, and thus traversal become much harder. In terms of loop response that we always focused on, the translucent texture is creating a less daunting LSE, and by proxy, the loom response suffers. Next, please. Yes. After finishing this, and before we move on to our second prototype, there are some change in our methodologies. Because of the situation, we are not able to have enough external testing to use the tool that we create before half to generate a heat map. And we'll also change our workflow from weekly sprint according to question that we want to answer to working on to create a moment that impresses our player. And with all that, it's time to move on to our second prototype, the one that emphasizes more on the combat part. For designing this, we really looked at interesting fantasies and out-of-the-box mechanism. Eventually, we landed on the powerful hand idea, which we thought could utilize strings of Vibe Index in simulating hands. We also built a short punching moment to see if we can build off it. We got a lot of useful feedback on this prototype during the playtest days, and next, Ziheng will talk more about this.
Zahang, we can't hear you.
Sorry. Thanks, Simon. In this prototype, we're seeking answers for a crucial question. How does the punching interaction with LSE feels like? We tested our punching movement in ETC playtest day. Good things about this moment is that you definitely feel visceral and powerful as a player, but we still need more context and explanation about where and how is this moment coming from. And also adding more feedback when the player or the LSE gets hit. Next, please. In order to make the punch moment feels powerful and realistic, we decided to make it as a final earned moment of the whole experience. In our design, the player will raise up his power level so he can finally defeat the LSE in the end. Also, we made a world that provides more narrative context and also explain the logic of why this final punching moment makes sense. Next, please. In this second half of the semester, we are building prototypes that address combat. So in our definition, combat with a large-scale enemy is not strictly attacking each other, but also including dodging the incoming attacks from the LC, assessing the current situation, planning a strategy, and finding opportunities to take down the opponent. Having all of these, just making the combat with the LC more alive and believable. Next, I will hand over to Jiajun to talk about the combat in details.
Yeah, thanks, Ziheng. So with a clear definition of what is combat, we have features in mind that we need to implement, which lead us back to considering movement. While combat is our focus, movement is still a vital aspect of it. Huge power difference between player and LSE requires the team to make the dodging moment close and intense, where a constant dashing mechanism seems to be a good fit. We tried out 3 different dashing mechanisms to see the best one, which works with our fantasy, and lock on the one that player can grab the crystal in distance and dash to it, which is not only fairly innovative in this field, but also fit the later traversing goal better. Other than movement, we also take risk in other forms to explore the topic. With bigger goals for a more polished experience, we think riskier options could teach us more important lessons. We removed hookshot and even the sword from the previous one to really emphasize the power of hand, but also place the team in a place that we are away from what we knew. We introduced a rock-formed bird as a new type of enemy to serve as tutorial for punching UI, but also seeking the question whether will this take focus away from LSE. Even though the old LSE is well liked, we still try to design a new LSE to tie into the world better, which also provided us more learnings of the production difficulties. As soft, we received many useful feedbacks. To make it clear, the new LSE was not finished at that time, so we still use the old one for the demo. On the good side, the game flow of the level, which start from the spiral bridge and later to the LSE, is good, and power dynamic is well established, and the final punching moment do make sense now. However, without certain context, the bird's enemy didn't work. Concern of making a new LSE do exist since the old one is well liked. We were all grateful for the positive feedbacks and decided to try our best to address the problem in our final changes. Here are the final changes we made. We complete the experience by adding the intro and final moment. The connection between birds and LSE is established to make them more cohesive, not only in art style, but also in a more organic interaction. Some VFX is added to amplify the feedback even more, and we changed the LSE model. We have a short demo video for this prototype. Please enjoy.
Thanks, Jajin. So as with any project, this one came with its own set of challenges. For instance, when the new LSE was implemented, we realized that the textures up close became pixelated. This was an issue that with a little bit more time, we would have loved to test more textures. Lots of moving objects can also lead to performance issues, and having stable frames per second is extremely vital, especially in an intimate experience such as virtual reality. This was something we tried to solve early on and were able to keep pretty stable. Intimate collisions are also super important. Clipping due to the physics system in place can really take the player out of the experience. And that's actually one of the reasons why we decided to design the LSE the way we did with floating parts so as to prevent that. Detailed interactions when on the LSE was something that was challenging for us to design. Currently, both of our prototypes have climbing as the answer to that, but more can definitely be explored on that front. And finally, replayability was a challenge we tried to deal with a little bit. Currently, both of our prototypes are very linear, and potentially having more options in which the player can choose to be able to take down the LSE would be something that can be, again, explored later on. And there are also a ton of lessons we learned throughout the course of this semester. For instance, having the LSE rise in some fashion elicits a much better response in the player. This hits on that physiological loom response we talked about before, and really hits on the sense of scale as well as keywords we had at have, such as daunting and gigantic. Movement, as we explained, is also such an important part of the combat experience, whether it's flying around on hook shots or doing some form of ground dashing. Feeling free and having a movement mechanism that works into the power fantasy, super vital for the experience. The LSE design is also important, whether it's having some kind of eye or head tracking to see where the LSE is looking, or working on organic movements and rates of animation to make the LSE form more alive. All of this brings you more into the experience. And finally, different ranges of interaction can amplify the sense of scale as well, whether it's approaching the LSE or when you're actually on the LSE and seeing the environment swirl around you. All of these little details work together to not only make the world seem big, but also the LSE. And before we end, we just wanted to give a shout out to some very special people, Janice, Steve, and all the ETC staff for making this COVID-19 transition as easy and seamless as possible. All of the playtesters from the first half of the semester that were able to come into our project room and give us vital feedback. Various online communities we reached out with to this project, including Virtual Reality, Valve Index, VR Dev, Oculus, and Vive. And finally, Ruth, Drew, Chris, and Jesse for giving us such in-depth feedback for softs. And also, I found out it's Teacher Appreciation Week, so everyone gets a big thank you. And in summary, we are Giant Combat, a student pitch project exploring melee combat against a large-scale enemy in virtual reality, and we are now open for questions.
All right, good job, team. Yay, y'all did a great job. And Dave's going to help moderate Q&A.
Go ahead, Mel.
Yeah, I don't know if you got to this, but can you talk a little bit about how lighting affected the experience and how you used it both from an art direction point of view, but also just navigating the experience?
I think Zihong, do you want to talk a little bit about like the lighting you put like for like you said like for the shadow and the bright side of it?
Oh, okay, yeah. So we want to put the so the lighting is basically to light up the place that the goal where the goal is. For example, when you see the spiral bridge, the first half of the bridge is shadowed, but the second half of the bridge is lightened. So it's generally like give a indication for players to just want to go someplace bright. And also the lighting direction also have a good view of the background ancient ruins. Like you can see the shape and the whole environment, and it's basically that's how we use the lighting. Hello?
Any other questions?
I got a question. You touched on it a little bit in the presentation, but I'm kind of curious if you had any more specifics about how you designed the second LSE based on lessons learned from the semester.
So the question is like how we design the LSE based on the lessons we learned. I guess like basically the first LSE we created is mostly like a placeholder to test, so we can get something early on that we can play with to have playtesters in to test these experiences. But like later on, actually the design is more focusing on whether changing the model with like a more high poly model with like more detailed texture, whether will this work, because we have like an initial hypothesis this will be like a crucial problem in our project, because our LSE is really big, and we know like with amplified models to like maybe like 40 or 50 times than its original size, is going to cause the texture to be like aliasing. So we saw like this could be a problem. So that's partially the reason why we want to test with new boss. But like in case of the design, I guess the only thing we take from the previous one is like how we managing the climbing route to make them I feel you always know where to go next. And also like for the art style is just to make them more cohesive with the environment art. So yeah.
Thanks.
Time for one more. All right, thanks team, really good job. Hey, good seeing you all. So next up, if you all can get ready and mute yourself, turn your videos off. Detox to solve the problems of giant combat. Whenever you're all ready.
Okay. You can hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. All right. Hi, we're Detox. This is the team. These are our advisors, Brenda and Dave. This is our client, Raul, along with Games for Change. We've made an experience to present at the virtual Games for Change Festival in July. It's a 45 to 60-minute session with an expected attendance of 40 to 100 people. It'll be streamed through Hop2, the streaming service Games for Change chose. So, what is Detox? Our mission statement is to encourage a greater understanding of online toxicity and healthier community moderation practices. Also, we focused on gaming toxicity specifically based on team interest. So, every team has had to make the shift to remote, and I'll be talking about how that specifically affected our team and project. At Halves, we were designing towards the Games for Change Festival in New York City in July. The plan was for 40 to 80 people to be in the same room, playing through our experience using both their own smart device and an iPad provided by us. As the festival has shifted to a virtual platform, we had to figure out how to make our in-person experience work as a streamed experience. We had a solid foundation at Halves, and we hadn't finalized too much for the in-person event, so we were able to pivot without too much strain. In terms of our experience structure and player transformations, they were already in a good place, so we didn't have to make changes there. That helped us be able to playtest earlier and more often. We chose Twitch as our streaming platform because it easily connects to many streaming tools, it allows streams to have many simultaneous viewers, it has a chat box, it's well known, and some of our team had experience using it before. This shift to Twitch removes the in-person interaction and replaces it with festival attendees connecting remotely. A benefit of this was being able to playtest our experience much easier than we would have been able to with an in-person experience, as we didn't have to get everyone in the same room to playtest. Something that worked in our favor was that we already set up Air Console to work with our experience. We are able to continue using it since its purpose is to allow players to connect to a game remotely. Previously, individual communities would be shown on an iPad in each group. After the switch to virtual, we had debated whether there should only be one big community or multiple that viewers got split up into. We decided on 4 communities as we wanted different opinions during discussion based on the community while still having each of them be visible. Previously, we had planned for groups to discuss amongst themselves before the MC would gather thoughts from each group. We had considered having each person send in messages through their smart device and Air Console, but decided on using the Twitch chat so that it would feel more like a connected discussion, and less like one person sending their thoughts into the void. Next, to show you what the final experience looks like in more detail, I'll pass it to Sherry.
Thank you, Stephanie. Same as what we had at half, our experience still featured 3 rounds of simulation and reflection. Before the actual simulation starts, guests will connect to our game on their phones using Air Console. Then the MC, whose role is the Detox Game Studio community lead, will teach guests how to play our simulation and the goal of the simulation, which is to moderate their online gaming communities and maintain a high population and a low community toxicity level. When the simulation starts, guests can easily tell which community they are moderating from the color and the emoji shown on their phone UI. When there is a disruption in the community, they will receive a report in their inbox, and they can tap to see the details about the disruption. And then they can choose appropriate punishment accordingly. Then the reported community member will be banned and removed from the community. The MC will end the first round when the reports become unmanageable and the community health plummet. Guests can view their performance both as a community and as an individual. And then they are prompted to reflect on why banning isn't effective in the Twitch chat. The discussion is followed by a video message from the R&D expert from Detox Gaming Studio, in which the expert will review the myths of online gaming toxicity, and then introduce the 2 upgrades the guests will use in the future rounds, AI moderators and the empathy training module. By the end of round 1, guests will undergo the first transformation and learn that consistently toxic gamers are in the minority. But at the same time, they will feel that the toxicity problem is virtually unsolvable. Now I'll pass over to Jamie to guide us through the rest of the experience.
Thanks, Sherry. After randomly assigning new investments to these communities, guests will play through another round of simulation. In communities with AI moderators, most toxic behavior reports are dealt with correctly by AI, which is represented by these robot hands instead of being sent to guest inboxes. And on the phone side, they will only receive fewer reports than round 1. For those who belong to the community with MC training strategy, they will see the new education tab in the inbox with a list of training candidates who are playing relatively positive in the community. Guests can go through a dialogue with the candidates to process MC training. The dialogue is advanced by pressing the send button, and the training process is ended by pressing the finish button. And then these candidates in the community will become an educated person who can prevent toxic events from happening and exert a positive influence. In this round, the new strategy works effectively in the beginning, but later it doesn't come up to our expectation, either because the toxicity level hits a plateau or the reports are still overwhelming because the guests cannot deal with the reports when they are doing MC training. The MC will stop the simulation and the guests will see their community report cards and their personal report cards on the phone side. Then the MC prompts groups to discuss and come up with reasons why the new strategies are effective and reasons why they don't completely solve the problem. Guests can express their opinions in the chat log on Twitch, and the MC will summarize these opinions and shares them on the screen. After that, guests are prompted to use both strategies in the final rounds of simulation. In this round, guests will find applying both AI banning and MC training make the toxic level decrease significantly. And once all communities have a positive climate and the overall toxicity level has dropped below a certain percentage, the MC will stop the simulation. And after round 3, we expect our guests have the feeling that the optimal strategy is a comprehensive approach instead of previous banning and jailing in the past, based on the result of round 2 and round 3. And then there's a debrief session following to go through the takeaways for our whole experience journey. Also, we show the research which our experience establishes on in order to combine the experience with what's going on in the current online industry and enhance our guests' understanding about the problem and promising way to solve it. By the end of the debrief, we expect our guests to figure out that moderation tools like AI and MC training are cost-effective to make the community a healthier place and transform their initial state that online toxicity is an unsolvable problem to that a healthy community is reachable. So now I'll pass to Parker to talk about our iterations.
Thank you, Jamie. So I'll just go over the 4 biggest iteration points we had throughout the design and development of the experience. They are game flow, feedback, show production, and story and aesthetics. I'll walk through them individually, starting with game flow. So this includes, of course, the just general where the simulation starts and where it ends per round. For example, in round 1, we start very calm and end up in a hectic and overwhelming place. But it also includes things that we discovered along the way, such as the lottery system. We originally used the voting system at halves, which had players vote to determine if they would get AI or empathy for the round 2. But usually, most players would just vote for empathy. It seemed like the obvious correct choice. So we switched to the lottery, which guarantees to get AI and to get empathy. We want both options to be explored for future discussion. And we also maintain a sense of anticipation with the lottery. Feedback includes things like visual or audio cues for certain actions or events, as you see on the right. But the biggest thing is the report card system, which addresses one of the larger flaws that we saw during our playtesting. Most players didn't feel the impact of their personal actions on the simulation itself. So we wanted to give them some sort of quantifiable numbers or visual representation of their contribution to the overall game. And each community team got one as well. Show production includes things like the green screen or a tripod for my camera, just to make things look as smooth as possible, but also things like the Elgato Stream Deck, which allowed us to program macros and hotkeys to control both the stream layouts and the Unity simulation itself as smoothly as possible. While these behind-the-scenes efforts weren't strictly necessary, they definitely made everything feel a lot smoother and easier, our side. Finally, the story and aesthetics. At halves, we had a sort of very basic emojis on a white plane look, and we moved to a more late 90s, early 2000s, like cyber internet feel, a la Dexter's Laboratory. The goal here was to evoke a sort of sense of nostalgia for a time when things were maybe a bit more simple, a bit more nice, friendly, and a hope that things can be that way again in the future. Now I'll pass it over to Derek to talk about some of our takeaways this semester.
Thanks, Parker. Now let's talk about some of our lessons learned or takeaways from this extraordinary semester. Our first takeaway was to make sure that you lay a solid foundation during your pre-production. At the onset of our project, we put all of our focus into researching our subject matter. Then we developed a solid mission statement laid on top of that. This concise statement guided every design decision through the rest of the semester. From there, we determined the next layer, and this included elements like our targeted myths and the transformations we want our players to go through, the player's role as moderators in a simulated experience, as well as the general 3-round structure of playing and reflecting. With the solid foundation built, we were more easily able to replace features made obsolete by our pivot, like the physical room ecosystem and the 3-screen layout, and we ended up replacing them with features like our Twitch integration. This leads into our next takeaway, which is to embrace agile development. When the time came to pivot, we made our initial design changes and pushed to get into the iterative cycles as quickly as possible. For example, in our early live tests, we started encountering this error where 20 players were attempting to connect to the game at the same time. This, in the bottom right there, you can see the ngrok error. This problem was only discovered through live testing, and because we were regularly running tests, we were able to improve on our solutions over time. Our playtesting strategy in this iterative cycle included 6 weekly playtests where we ran through the experience live for around 20 viewers on average. While most of these playtests were focused on general usability, game flow, and tech, we also conducted a stress test specifically aiming to check our networking capabilities, as that was one of the hurdles we encountered most often. We used a couple of methods to gather our user research data during these playtests. Namely, we recorded the sessions on Twitch using OBS, and we reviewed the chat log, and anywhere a question came up, we could connect it back to what was actually happening during the experience. In addition to that, we also sent out a survey that we had our players fill out after the experience, and these included general questions about how they felt about the experience, as well as their online gaming habits. Finally, our last takeaway is a collection of methods we used to stay connected during this time. We felt like this image a little bit at times after the world had just changed. We're still working with our team pretty closely, but we're still not in the same room to them. So we had losing focus, motivation, and team cohesion was much easier during this remote work. So we had to find ways to keep the team connected and communicating effectively. A few of the methods we used are shown here. The first was a task journal in our Slack channel where we would put in little updates, screenshots, GIFs maybe of things we were working on. And these would often spin out into conversations where we would give each other feedback or answer questions that have come up during our work. We also held a daily call with each other, preferably with video on so we can see each other's faces. This essentially was our Scrum meeting every day. We would look at our Trello board, determine what we got done and what we were continuing to doing. But we would also keep this call open, but we would turn off our video and mic, but it was to simulate the feeling of being in the same room as each other. And just if you have a quick question, we were able to unmute, just call out to someone in the call and then have that conversation. You could also overhear people, which is something that you don't really get doing remote work. Lastly, we had a random thread where we were goofing off and we made custom emojis for our Slack, and this really improved team morale over time. And we bonded over common interests like Animal Crossing. So here's a little picture of all of us on one of our islands. Moving forward, we only have a couple milestones left to hit. We currently have our experience polished and tested. We will, of course, run it again at final playthroughs. We will test the experience on Hopin 2, that is Game for Change's chosen platform, early next week, ahead of presenting the experience at the Games for Change Festival in July. With that, special thanks to all of our collaborators and advisors for this project, and that is the end of our presentation. We're now open for questions.
All right, great job, team. Yay. Nice background. All right, Dave's going to help moderate Q&A.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I have a question about the platform, this Hop Into, that you won't test until next week. Is there a reason you didn't try to test it sooner? Maybe the client didn't tell you that you're not going to use Twitch until much later. And then related to that, a question on scaling and being able to be confident this will run with 100 people. I know it's always a challenge to test scale, but I'm just curious about your confidence about running successfully with 100.
All right, so I can address the first question pretty easily about Hop Into the platform. If I understand correctly, the question is why we didn't test earlier on the chosen platform of Games for Change, which is Hop Into. So the reason for that is basically because we couldn't. We're unable to. Games for Change needs to set up their own, I believe, event on Hop Into, and our connection with Games for Change, Raul, our client, has told us that he won't be able to set us up a test session until early next week at the earliest. So we'll definitely be testing at least once, of course, probably multiple times before the festival itself. And we're hoping to test at least once before the end of the semester as well. On your second question, if I recall, it was our confidence on scaling up to 100 people. We've only play tested with a maximum of 37 people simultaneously as of this moment. So this is something we thought about a bit. And on just a pure numbers side, like say the number of reports going out from our simulation to people's phones, we've cranked that knob about as high as we think is feasible at the moment. It's probably overcranked for the current playtests. So we'll never know for sure how that will play exactly with 100 people, if we do hit 100 people. But the sort of flow of the simulation, the population and toxicity at the end of each round, that's something that we've built in controls on our side so we can sort of nudge things in the right direction if they don't seem to be going the way that we want them to.
Cool. Any other questions?
Right. It looks like you all presented so well. We're speechless.
Love to hear it.
So great job, team. Good job to Detox for cleaning up the air for us here.
Thank you. Thank
And
you.
next up for the day, if y'all get ready to mute yourselves, turn off your screens, and Steam and Ear can step up and end the day for us. See, 1, 2, 3. Whenever y'all are ready.
Okay. We're all ready, right?
Yeah,
yep.
I'm ready.
Oh, they are.
Okay. So we are Team Steamineer, and we aim to create an activity toolkit for kids and caregivers to learn collaboration by modifying game controller to play a game. And here is our team. These are our advisor, Dave and Scott. And our presentation will be divided into 5 parts: introduction, deliverables, and playtests, deliverable iterations, and our next steps. Before halves, we partner with the Assemble and playtest in person at their makerspace. After halves, we playtest remotely with several families from ETC and Shell Games. And we are handing off our deliverable to John after finals, who could facilitate it and potentially get to the Assemble in the future. For our audience, we shifted from 3rd to 5th graders at the Assemble to similar age group kids with caregivers. And here is a recap for our iteration journey before halves. Originally, we came up with a cardboard button maze to playtest collaboration, but we found out that communication between kids were ineffective. However, they enjoyed the experience, including designing the controller panel and playing the game, and they preferred to collaborate with their friends. In order to let the kids be more immersed and communicate better, we added a background story and a controller making session. After all these in-person playtests at the Assemble, we designed a toolkit with adjustable Arduino inputs. Also, we iterated on our instructions to support both the kids and the facilitators. These are our 3 key evaluation of success for our project, and that is transformational content, prototype iteration, and high quality playtesting. The transformational goal of our experience is to strengthen students' collaboration and communication skills. And now Mimi is going to talk about our details of our deliverables.
Thanks, Isabel. First, our deliverables includes an instruction guide either for download or print. This instruction guides the player from the starting story, how to construct their controllers, to the end of playing the game. Second, we include a pre-constructed Arduino toolkit with sensors incorporated with a prefabricated cardboard controller panel to let the player build their own controllers. Third, they will use the controller they build to play the digital game. Last, we also conclude a 3D controller model for 3D print or laser cut to make the controller more stable for future use whenever 3D printing or laser cut machine is accessible. This is a montage of our recent playtest. First, the players will use the keyboard to play the game to let them get familiar with the submarine game mechanisms. For the making part, they could decorate the controller and modify the control panel with different sensors. Each sensor has a character on the top. After they construct the controller, They can start to assign different sensors to 3 game functions: submarine power, collect crystals, and attack enemies. When they select the sensors, they could see the characters on the sensors appear in the digital game submarine. This game have a testing section to let the player freely test the sensors they want to pick and make sure it works in the real game. After they selected all the sensors, they will collaborate and communicate with each other to collect as much as crystals they can in the limited time. They could also replay the game to try different combination of sensors. And now Gloria will talk about our playtest.
Thanks, Mimi. After half, we conduct both remote playtest and online playtest. We try to collect the quantitative feedbacks from the online playtest while collecting the qualitative feedback through the remote playtest. We did a 4 high-quality remote playtests with 4 families who come from both shell game or ETC. How we implemented those playtests is our team will prepare a toolkit box, and then we will drop off the box to the player's home, and the facilitator will use their phones to record videos during the playtest, and then upload those videos to the Google Drive. At last, we will come up with the post-playtest interview to gather more feedbacks. For the online version, player are allowed to use the keyboard to experience the game and then finish the online surveys, so we can test the game mechanism with a broader audience. For the first remote playtest, Soba's family joined us, and Hazel, who is age 6 and finished the playtest with 2 facilitators. They had identified the needs of the testing section. And Hazel also mentioned that the game and instruction guide have to support the same goals and promise. And Hazel had some difficulties of using the controller by herself. So we did the following iterations. We add the sensor testing section, and we also create a printable instruction document for the facilitators. We try to update the controller design and make it more suitable for the multiplayer games. And for the second remote playtest, Comedy family joined us, and Josh, who is 9 years old, finished the playtest with 1 facilitator. The testing section works very successful, but there has some issue with the input functionality. Josh preferred using controller than the keyboard, but he didn't try to manipulate the controller. So we did the following iterations. We try to encourage the player to interact more with the input. So we assign the characters to different sensors and also add the different visual effect to differentiate the input to testing sections. We also present the controller with the input out of the place. And Mia will introduce the iteration after soft opening.
Thank you, Yifan. After 2 remote playtests, we have soft opening. From feedback, we further polish our game from 3 aspects. First, we simplify documentation and develop into 2 versions. One for facilitator with more game setup detail, and one for kids with more icons and images. Second, we further polish game, include color changing effects on submarine, added in-scene music, updated in-scene based on crystal count, and clarify UI in the testing space. Third, we polish our controller, include assign characters to each sensor, and develop a laser cutting version of controller. Potentially in the future, player can laser cut it and assemble them into a controller by themselves. With those iterations, we conducted 2 more playtests with Sean's family and Jason's family. First of all, they all enjoy the game and will play it again. They love the button and sound commands and characters on each sensor. They experiment multiple times. For example, Jason's family made a propeller for motor sensor, trying to make it move faster. Also, from playtest video and interviews, we have the observation that help us iterate. First, we further polish our game by adding a replay button, progress bar, and also update the game enemy. Second, we update the controller with a direction indicator on sensor. Next, I will talk about deliverable iteration. The first one is controller iteration. In first version, we design a cube-shaped controller, arranging 5 functional sensors into each side. The shortcoming of this kind of shape is not easy to operate, not enough hands to control every side. So in next version, we develop a new game controller, which contains 2 game panels and 6 functional modules. Each panel will Each player will choose 3 functional modules and arrange them into one panel. After soft opening, we develop a laser-cut version. After third and fourth playtest, we added character and direction indicators. For next step, we intend to use 3D printing technology as our final delivery. Next, I will let Yifan talk about art iteration.
Thanks, Mia. And the overall visual design is to keep the underwater theming, which children would feel more familiar with. And we also try to create the motivation of making controller through the storytelling. So we tell the story about the player will play as a captain with 5 magic sailors driving the submarine to save the undercities Atlantis to make the whole game experience more engaging. So we also create some wow moment by showing the character on the windows of submarine during the gameplay. And we also offer the feedback to let the player evaluate their performance at the end of each game. And we try to clarify the goals to create the motivation of the replayability. And Max will introduce the tech iteration.
Thank you, Ivan. Now I'll talk about our tech iterations. So because of the lockdown, we have to find other ways to conduct playtests. So we develop a web version of the game that is hosted on our project website to allow us to collect more feedback on the game. On the other hand, to make it easier for playtesters to set up the Arduino controller themselves with our help, we implemented the ability for the game to automatically detect the Arduino once it's connected to the computer via a USB cable, as you can see here. Additionally, because of our original supplier's delivery schedule was massively delayed, we had to find an alternative supplier. So we switched over to SparkFun and we adapted our code to fit their sensor output. For some of them, we even have to like solder pins and jumpers on them, but we make them all work. And to encourage the players to try out different sensors and provide more positive feedback in the game, every sensor has a unique attack effect. And collecting crystals also temporarily changes the appearance of your submarine. We also added a pop-up debugging space so that when players are choosing the sensors to use, they can directly test them out in the same screen without having to jump into the game. And they can switch the sensors here without having to restart the game. Next, Marissa will talk about our instruction iteration.
Sorry, thank you, Max. Our final deliverable has 2 versions. There's a facilitator guide and a kids guide. The kids guide is primarily photo-based and it's designed to support creativity and critical thinking and problem solving by using open-ended prompts. The facilitator guide has more text and is designed to give facilitators a clear picture of what the activity is so that they can support student exploration during the activity. We were able to playtest the facilitator guide with facilitators and iterate on it. We have not been able to playtest the kids instructions guide. And now for our next steps. So our handoff will be to John Baelish. We will be giving him digital copies of the blueprint for 3D printing or laser cutting the controller, the game build, both of the instruction guides, and the supply list. And then physically, we will give him the controller we have and the Arduino toolkit. With the list of supplies and the blueprint for either 3D printing or laser cutting, John will be able to recreate the controller so that he can have more of them to support a larger group of playtesters. We've talked to John, and future implementation of this activity could look like summer camp programming and or after school programming. And he hopes to add other things to it, like potentially hosting tournaments or having a leaderboard. We would like to say thank you. We've gotten a lot of help with this project, and particularly with the unforeseen circumstances. We have benefited from a lot of different people helping us. So specifically, we would like to call out the Assemble Makerspace team, our subject matter experts, all of our playtesters, John Baelish, and especially the families who let us playtest with them during the pandemic. And with that, we are Team Steam and Ear. we developed a facilitated activity for students in grades 3 through 5 to learn collaboration by modifying a game controller in order to play a game. And we are now open for questions.
All right, great job, team. Yay. And Dave will help moderate questions.
Carl, you want to go ahead?
Sure. Thanks for the really interesting presentation. I'm curious about if you were able to measure any results of actually the kids learning about collaboration or communications.
So the question is, he's curious about if we were able to see results of the kids learning about collaboration and communication, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I will say from a qualitative standpoint, we observed it particularly in the playtest with the sisters. So it was our last playtest and we had 2 kids participate in it. They both made comments about how it was challenging because I think one of them was steering and was responsible for charging the battery, and the other one was shooting and collecting crystals. And so the one that was steering would also try to remind her sister that she had to collect the crystals while they were near the crystal. And during that playtest, they did make a comment about how it was hard to make sure that everything was getting done while they were trying to accomplish it. And then other things we observed, and it's less collaboration specific, but we would observe facilitators cheering on players while they were doing it. So in the example of Sean and his daughter, they kind of rooted for each other. And then we did see a little bit of collaboration too when they made the propeller for the motor in the last playtest.
I would imagine that a lot of the collaboration communication also comes from building the controllers together and setting it up and getting it to working, not just the part of playing the game together. Is that true?
Yes, it is true. And we did observe it. I think as a team, we were in kind of this progress of trying to get to the point where, as far as creating controllers right now, we're at like input selection phase. And so there is collaboration in the input selection phase. And I think future versions of this project could include more emphasis on the controller construction.
Great, thank you.
Mike, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, you have a really interesting project at this time. I'm sure lots of families would love to get their hands on this and make use of it. Some of those families may not have anybody in the ETC or shell games or even tech space. So I'm wondering what you think about your facilitator document for families that may not have the technical expertise. Do you think it will work for them as well?
I will say it is designed with the intent of people who are using it to either be familiar with facilitating and also familiar with the technology that we were using. So I wouldn't say that it would necessarily support those goals, but.
Time for one more. All right, then. Good job, Steam in the Air. And congratulations to all the teams. Good job today, and we'll see you all tomorrow. Great job, everyone. Yay. And faculty, I will close this one down and I'll open up the next one. Everybody take care. Have a nice night.